There is a moment that every human being eventually encounters. It lasts only a fraction of a second. An Olympic archer draws the bow. A surgeon reaches for the scalpel. A firefighter steps into a burning building. A pilot realizes both engines have failed. In that single instant, something extraordinary happens. Some minds become perfectly clear. Others collapse beneath the weight of a single thought. For centuries, people believed courage was the difference. Modern neuroscience tells a different story. Under extreme pressure, the brain doesn't simply become faster, it becomes narrower. Attention contracts, perception changes, time itself begins to feel different. The greatest danger is no longer the situation unfolding outside. It is the mind becoming trapped inside itself. What if the true battle has never been against an opponent, but against the moment your own thoughts stop flowing? More than 400 years ago, during one of the most transformative periods in Japanese history, a Zen monk began exchanging letters with the greatest swordsman of his age. They weren't discussing sharper blades, stronger armor, or secret fighting techniques. Instead, they explored a far more dangerous weapon, the human mind. That monk was Takuan Sōhō. His words would eventually become one of the most influential works ever written on Zen and mastery, the Unfettered Mind. Despite being written for samurai, its lessons were never limited to the battlefield, because the battlefield changes with every generation. Today, it might be an operating room, a courtroom, a stage, a classroom, or simply an ordinary conversation where one careless thought has the power to change everything. The weapons have changed, the human mind has not. Welcome to Book Bite. Today, we're exploring a book that is not really about swordsmanship. It is about attention, fear, freedom, and one timeless question. How do you remain completely present when the world around you falls into chaos?
The Monk and the Swordsman. To understand the unfettered mind, we first have to leave the modern world behind. Japan, the early 16th century. For more than 100 years, the country had been consumed by civil war. Power shifted constantly. Clans rose, collapsed, and disappeared. For a samurai, every sunrise carried the possibility of being the last. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. After the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu unified Japan. The age of endless war began to fade. Peace arrived. But peace created an unexpected problem. What becomes of a warrior when there are no more battles to fight? Many samurai spent their entire lives mastering the sword, yet suddenly their greatest challenge was no longer defeating an enemy, it was governing themselves. During this remarkable period, something extraordinary happened. Japan's greatest warriors began seeking guidance not only from military strategists, but from philosophers, poets, and Zen monks. Among those monks, one name stood above the rest: Takuan Sōhō. He was famous for speaking with unusual honesty. He advised emperors, challenged political leaders, and became one of the most respected Zen teachers in Japan. But one of his most fascinating relationships was with Yagyu Munenori, the legendary sword instructor to the Tokugawa shogun himself. Munenori already knew how to win battles. What he wanted to understand was something even more difficult: How does the mind remain completely free at the exact moment when hesitation means death? Takuan's answer was unexpected. He barely spoke about the sword. Instead, he spoke about attention, because in his eyes, a sword had never defeated anyone. The mind holding it did. And that simple idea would become one of the most profound conversations between Zen and human performance ever recorded. Today, neuroscientists would describe it using different language. Psychologists would measure it with experiments. Elite athletes would recognize it instantly. But 400 years ago, a Zen monk had already begun pointing toward the same invisible truth. The greatest battle is rarely fought with the hands. It is fought inside the mind.
The mind that stops. Takuan Sōhō believed that the most dangerous moment in any battle was not when the sword was raised. It was the instant the mind stopped moving. Imagine a duel between two skilled swordsmen. One notices the opponent's blade and becomes completely fixated on it. Another worries about making a mistake. Another begins calculating the perfect counterattack. Each of them appears to be thinking, yet according to Takuan, all three have already lost. Because the moment attention becomes trapped, the mind loses its freedom. He described this as the mind stopping, not because thinking itself is wrong, but because awareness becomes imprisoned by a single object. To a Zen monk, a stopped mind is like water frozen into ice. It can no longer flow where it is needed. Centuries later, neuroscience would uncover a remarkably similar phenomenon. Under intense pressure, the brain activates ancient survival systems. The amygdala, one of the brain's primary threat detection centers, begins preparing the body for danger. Heart rate rises, muscles tighten, breathing changes. These reactions are essential for survival, but they also produce an unexpected side effect. Attention becomes dramatically narrower. Psychologists call this attentional narrowing. Instead of perceiving the entire situation, the brain locks onto what it believes is the single greatest threat. For an early human escaping a predator, this response was life-saving. For a modern surgeon, pilot, or athlete, it can become a serious disadvantage. The brain becomes so focused on one detail that it stops seeing everything else. Remarkably, this is exactly what Takuan warned against 4 centuries earlier, not because he understood neurons or brain scans, but because he understood observation. He had watched countless warriors discover the same truth. They were not defeated by the sword. They were defeated by the moment their own attention became trapped by it. And once the mind loses its freedom, the body soon follows. There is another reason the stopped mind fascinated Takuan, because it appears far beyond the battlefield. Watch an experienced pianist perform alone. Their hands move with remarkable precision. Now place the same pianist on the world's biggest stage. Suddenly, fingers that have repeated the same movements thousands of times begin to hesitate. A basketball player misses a free throw they have practiced since childhood. A public speaker forgets a sentence they knew perfectly an hour earlier. A golfer overthinks a putt they would normally make without effort. The skill did not disappear. The mind became trapped. Modern psychology has spent decades studying this phenomenon. Researchers call it choking under pressure. One of the leading explanations is something known as the explicit monitoring theory. Under normal conditions, well-practiced skills operate almost automatically. The brain allows years of training to guide the body without constant conscious supervision. But under intense pressure, something changes. The mind begins watching itself. It starts analyzing movements that were never meant to be analyzed. The pianist begins thinking about every finger. The golfer thinks about every muscle. The speaker begins examining every word before saying it. The brain interrupts its own expertise. Ironically, the harder a person tries to control the performance, the less natural that performance becomes. Takuan described the same mistake in remarkably simple language. He warned that if the mind remains fixed on the sword, it cannot respond to the opponent. If it remains fixed on winning, it cannot respond to the present moment. If it remains fixed on itself, it can no longer perceive the world clearly. Attention must continue flowing, not because focus is unimportant, but because awareness is larger than focus. Perhaps this is why the greatest performers often describe their finest moments in surprisingly similar ways. They rarely remember thinking more. They remember thinking less. Their actions seem to unfold on their own. The mind stopped interfering and simply allowed years of preparation to express themselves. For Takuan, this effortless awareness had a name. It was called Mushin, the mind that remains completely awake without becoming trapped by anything it sees.
Mushin. Few ideas in Japanese philosophy have been misunderstood more than this one. Mushin. It is often translated as no mind. To many people, that sounds impossible. How can a human being act without thinking? But that was never what Takuan meant. Mushin does not mean the absence of thought. It means the absence of attachment to thought. Thoughts still appear. Emotions still arise. Fear may still knock at the door. The difference is, nothing stays long enough to imprison the mind. Takuan often compared the mind to flowing water. Water reflects everything placed before it, yet it clings to nothing. It mirrors the mountain, then continues downstream. It reflects the moon, then moves on. It never argues with what it has seen. It never carries yesterday's reflection into tomorrow. This was the kind of mind he believed a swordsman should cultivate. A mind that notices everything without becoming trapped by anything. Centuries later, scientists studying elite performance began describing remarkably similar experiences. They called it the flow state. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades interviewing artists, musicians, surgeons, rock climbers, and Olympic athletes. Despite working in completely different worlds, they described almost the same experience. Their sense of self became quieter. Time seemed to slow down or disappear completely. Actions unfolded naturally, without the exhausting feeling of forcing each decision. The remarkable part was not that they stopped thinking, it was that unnecessary thinking faded into the background. Their attention became completely absorbed by what was happening right now. Today, brain imaging studies suggest that during deep states of flow, activity in parts of the default mode network often decreases. This network is heavily involved in self-referential thinking, the constant inner narration of, how am I doing? What if I fail? What will people think? As this internal commentary grows quieter, the brain becomes more available to the task itself. 400 years before functional brain scans existed, Takuan had already pointed toward the same destination, not through laboratory experiments, but through careful observation of the human mind. Because true freedom was never the absence of awareness, it was awareness without unnecessary interference.
There is one detail about Mushin that makes it even more extraordinary. Most people believe calmness is something you create after the pressure disappears. Takuan believed the opposite. The mind must remain free while the pressure is happening. Not before it, not after it, during it. This is what separated a master from a beginner. A beginner waits for perfect conditions before acting. A master learns to move inside imperfect conditions. Modern neuroscience has discovered something surprisingly similar. The brain is constantly making predictions about what will happen next. Every sound, every movement, every face is compared against an internal model built from past experience. Scientists call this predictive processing. Most of the time, these predictions help us react quickly. But under stress, the brain begins predicting danger everywhere. A harmless mistake feels catastrophic. A small setback becomes overwhelming. An uncertain future is treated as though it has already happened. The brain stops responding to reality and starts responding to its own predictions. Perhaps this explains why two people can experience the exact same situation, yet respond in completely different ways. The event is identical. The mind interpreting it is not. Takuan understood this long before the language of neuroscience existed. He warned that once the mind becomes attached to fear, it no longer sees the opponent. Once it becomes attached to victory, it no longer sees the present moment. Once it becomes attached to itself, it no longer sees reality. The world has not changed, only the mind observing it has. Perhaps this is why Zen places such extraordinary importance on awareness, not because awareness removes uncertainty, but because awareness allows us to meet uncertainty without immediately becoming trapped by it. And once the mind learns to move freely through fear, another invisible chain begins to reveal itself, a chain that affects every human being, whether they have ever held a sword or not. Attachment. If Mushin is the state of a free mind, attachment is everything that prevents it. When most people hear the word attachment, they think of possessions, wealth, status, success. But Takuan was pointing towards something far more subtle. The mind can become attached to an idea, to an expectation, to an identity, to a memory, even to the desire to never make a mistake. And once attachment appears, freedom quietly disappears. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter the hand closes, the faster the sand slips away. Yet with an open hand, it simply rests where it is. Takuan believed the mind behaves in much the same way. The more desperately it clings, the less clearly it sees. Modern psychology offers an unexpected explanation. One of the brain's primary responsibilities is protecting the self, not only the body, but the image we hold of who we are. Researchers call this self-referential processing. When that identity feels threatened, whether through criticism, failure, or uncertainty, the brain often reacts as though it is facing physical danger. Stress hormones rise, attention narrows, defensiveness increases. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about discovering the truth. It becomes about protecting the ego. This is why two people can witness the same event, yet remember it completely differently. The mind is no longer observing reality. It is defending its own story. Takuan warned that this invisible attachment is one of the greatest obstacles to clear perception, because the moment the mind becomes occupied with protecting itself, it loses the freedom to fully experience what is actually happening. Perhaps this is why some of the wisest people in history appeared unusually calm, not because life had given them fewer problems, but because fewer things were capable of imprisoning their attention. The battle was never against the world. It was against the invisible chains the mind quietly placed upon itself.
Freedom. If attachment is the chain, then freedom is not something we gain. It is something we uncover. This is why Takuan chose the title, The Unfettered Mind. A fetter is a chain placed around the ankles of a prisoner. It limits movement, not by destroying strength, but by quietly reducing freedom. Takuan believed the human mind lives with countless invisible fetters: fear of failure, attachment to success, regret about the past, anxiety about the future, the need to always be right, the desire to control what cannot be controlled. None of these chains can be seen, yet they shape nearly every decision we make. Centuries later, psychologists began studying a similar phenomenon. They discovered that the human brain consumes enormous amounts of energy trying to suppress uncertainty. We naturally seek closure, clear answers, predictable outcomes, because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. But the irony is striking. Life has never promised certainty. The more tightly we demand it, the more exhausted the mind becomes. Researchers call this the intolerance of uncertainty. It has been linked to chronic anxiety, overthinking, and compulsive decision-making. The mind becomes trapped, not because reality is dangerous, but because it refuses to accept that reality is unpredictable. Takuan saw the same pattern long before psychology gave it a name. He never suggested controlling every circumstance. He suggested freeing the mind from its need to control them. Because a mind that insists on certainty will always be disturbed by change. But a mind that remains open moves with change instead of resisting it. Perhaps this is why water appears so often throughout Japanese philosophy. Water never argues with the shape of the river. It simply continues flowing, not because it is weak, but because nothing can imprison what refuses to become rigid. And maybe that is the deepest meaning of freedom. Not living in a world without uncertainty, but carrying a mind that is no longer chained by it. Yet, if this philosophy was once written for samurai, why does it feel almost more relevant today than it did 400 years ago? To answer that, we have to look at the battlefield we now live in. The modern battlefield. When Takuan wrote these letters, the battlefield was easy to recognize. It was a field of armor, horses, and drawn swords. Today, very few people will ever stand in such a place. Yet strangely, millions wake up every morning already exhausted by battles no one else can see. Not battles for survival, battles for attention. A notification interrupts a conversation. An email arrives before the previous task is finished. A headline demands immediate outrage. An endless stream of opinions competes for a few seconds of awareness. Never in human history has so much information fought for the same mind. Neuroscientists have begun referring to attention as one of the brain's most limited resources. Every decision, every interruption, every shift in focus carries a hidden cost. Research on task switching shows that when attention is repeatedly pulled from one activity to another, the brain does not instantly recover. Part of its focus remains attached to the previous task. Psychologists call this attention residue. Even after the screen goes dark or the conversation ends, a portion of the mind is still somewhere else. Perhaps this explains why so many people reach the end of the day feeling mentally drained without remembering what truly occupied their attention. The body remained in one place, the mind visited 100 others. Takuan could never have imagined smartphones, social media, or 24-hour news cycles, yet he understood the deeper danger perfectly. The greatest threat was never distraction itself. It was allowing the mind to become trapped wherever distraction happened to point. The battlefield has changed. The arrows are now notifications. The swords are now endless demands for attention. The enemy is no longer standing across the field. It is competing quietly for ownership of the mind. Perhaps this is why the Unfettered Mind feels less like an ancient martial arts text and more like a guide written for the modern world. Because every generation believes its greatest challenge is something outside itself, yet the oldest wisdom keeps pointing in the opposite direction. The quality of a life has always depended upon the quality of the attention living it. And once history, science, and Zen are placed side by side, a remarkable pattern begins to emerge. Connecting the invisible threads. History tells one part of the story. Science explains another. Zen reveals something neither could fully describe on its own. For centuries, these worlds seemed completely separate. A monk meditating in a quiet temple, a neuroscientist studying electrical activity inside the brain, an Olympic athlete preparing for the biggest competition of a lifetime, a violinist stepping onto a concert stage. Their lives appear to have nothing in common, yet they are all searching for the same thing, a mind that remains fully alive without becoming trapped. Modern research continues to arrive at a remarkable conclusion. Elite performance is rarely determined by intelligence alone, or talent, or even years of practice. It depends on something more subtle, the ability to direct attention and release it at the right moment. Too little attention and mistakes appear. Too much attention and the mind begins interfering with itself. The greatest performers do not force every movement into existence. They create the conditions and allow years of preparation to emerge naturally. Perhaps this is why Takuan spent so little time discussing the sword itself. He understood that every generation would carry different tools. Today, they may be laptops, medical instruments, musical instruments, or cameras. Tomorrow, they will become something else. The tools continue changing. The human mind does not. That is why these 400-year-old letters still feel strangely familiar. They were never teaching people to become better samurai. They were exploring one timeless question. What kind of mind remains free when fear appears, when success arrives, when failure hurts, when uncertainty refuses to disappear? Perhaps every philosophy, every scientific discovery, and every great work of art has been approaching that same question from a different direction. Not because they share the same language, but because they are observing the same human experience. And maybe that is why the greatest battles have never been fought on open fields. They have always been fought inside the quiet space between a single thought and the next.
Final reflection. 4 centuries have passed since Takuan Sōhō wrote these letters. The castles of the samurai have become museums. The battlefields have become silent. The swords have been placed behind glass. History moved on. Yet the human mind remained astonishingly familiar. We still hesitate. We still cling. We still become trapped by thoughts that have not yet happened, or by memories that can never be changed. Perhaps that is why the unfettered mind continues to speak across centuries. Not because it offers techniques for winning battles, but because it quietly asks a question that every generation must answer for itself. What is it that truly holds your mind captive? Is it fear, expectation, success, failure, or simply the endless habit of believing that every thought deserves to be followed? The remarkable thing about freedom is that it rarely arrives by adding something new. More often, it appears the moment unnecessary burdens begin to fall away. A river does not become powerful because it forces its way forward. It becomes powerful because it never stops flowing. The wind does not argue with the mountain. It simply moves around it. Water never asks permission to continue its journey. Perhaps nature has been demonstrating this lesson all along. Movement without attachment, strength without rigidity, awareness without fear. The samurai believed mastery began with the sword. Takuan believed it began much earlier, in the quiet space where attention chooses whether to remain free or become trapped. And perhaps that choice still shapes every ordinary day of our lives. Because long before we speak, before we decide, before we act, the mind has already chosen where it will rest. Maybe that has always been the real battlefield, not somewhere beyond the horizon, but within the invisible landscape of attention itself. Thank you for joining us on Book Bite. Until our next journey, keep observing, keep questioning, and remember, the strongest mind is not the one that controls everything. It is the one that nothing can quietly imprison.